Good morning and welcome to another exciting edition of Daybreak on Trust TV. It is another day in the Federal Capital Territory and we are super excited to be here with you today. My name is Darshan Husseina Usman. Welcome once again. Today on Daybreak, Nigeria's diplomatic relations is what we will be discussing, and we'll take a look at Nigeria's bilateral relations in the context of the book titled With Heart and Might, plus Nigeria's monetary policy and CBN growth projection. And as usual, we're bringing you headlines from major newspapers from across the country. But first, the news highlights. A federal high court in Abuja will on Friday deliver judgment in a suit filed by the People's Democratic Party against Governor Ben Ayade of Cross Rivers following his defection from the PDP to the All Progressives Congress. The PDP, through its counsel, Emmanuel Okala, SAN, had filed a suit before Justice Taiwo to seek an order sacking the governor and his deputy over their defection, among others. Justice Taiwo on Tuesday presides that the judgment in the suit will come up on Friday, March 25th, 2022. Report says Justice Taiwo had on Monday ordered 2 House of Representatives members representing Cross Rivers and 18 lawmakers from the State House of Assembly to vacate their seats over their defection to the APC and dismiss the defense argument that the PDP had no legal rights to institute the case. He also dismissed other preliminary objections raised by the sacked lawmakers and ruled that the argument by the lawmakers that the rancor that existed in the PDP necessitated their defection to APC as a ploy to mislead the court. Moving on to more stories, oil prices on Tuesday climbed higher amidst talks by some European Union members to ban Russian oil and attacks of Saudi Arabia's oil facilities. Reports say Brent crude futures gained 1.5% to $117.3 a barrel, while West Texas Intermediate futures witnessed a corresponding of over 1% trading at $113.3 a barrel. European Union foreign ministers had disagreed over joining the U.S. in sanctioning Russian oil, with Germany saying the bloc is too dependent on Russia's fossil fuels. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia had warned it will not be responsible for disruptions to global supply following recent attacks on its facilities by Yemen's Houthi movement. The comment is coming after fired missiles and drones at facilities of the Saudi state oil firm over the weekend, leading to a temporary drop in its refinery output. While in Nigeria, persistent supply disruptions caused by technical challenges, theft, and pipeline sabotage continue to pose a serious threat to Nigeria's oil output and causing loss of 80% of Nigeria's oil production. Meanwhile, oil production had dropped in February to an average of 1.25 million barrels per day from 1.39 million the previous month. And finally, Kenneth Omeruo has joined the Super Eagles camp on Tuesday to make the number of those on ground 18. Joe Aribo, Calvin Bassey, Innocent Bonke, and Emmanuel Dennis had earlier arrived before Omeruo. The count ended at 13 on Monday when Leicester City's Kelechi Iheanacho joined the team, while Bonke came as a replacement for Wilfred Ndidi, who got injured during a UEFA Europa Conference League game against Rennes. Meanwhile, Emmanuel Dennis returns to the side after failing to join up for the AFCON campaign due to misunderstanding between his club and country, while Napoli hitman Victor Osimhen is among those still being expected. And that's a wrap on news highlights today. Now, before we move on, let's have a look at historical events that happened today.
This is Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
So today is World Meteorological Day, and every year on this day, World Meteorological Day celebrates the date when the World Meteorological Organization was formed in 1950, and this day also educates the public on the importance of meteorology, you know, barometer pressure, jet stream, wind chill factor, cloud cover, you know, chance of precipitation, and, you know, the weather in general, you know, very, very important because, you know, every country is actually complaining about climate change these days, and even Nigeria is actually not left out. I mean, we've seen how December, that used to be our winter, Harmattan, you know, was really, really hot, and the rains are not here till now and everything. So, you know. As I said, Harmattan. You know, our winter is Harmattan, you know. Good morning. So, good morning, Z.
Good morning. It's nice to have you.
Yes.
It's really interesting to be here.
Definitely.
Though I came late.
No, you know, there are lots of factors that could have, you know, contributed to that. So it's actually understandable. And also in 2012, African Union suspends Mali's membership following a coup. So, you know, the coup didn't just start, you know, this year. In 1995, dollar equals 88.41 yen. And that was actually a record. That's why it's, you know, part of an event that happened today. And we're just talking about how, you know, a dollar is equal 590 naira right about now.
Massive.
In 1981, U.S. Supreme Court upholds law making statutory rape a crime only for men. Now, if we had a man in the studio right now, he would complain, why not women as well? In 1965, Moroccan army shoots on demonstrators and about 100 were killed. And in 1956, Pakistan proclaimed an Islamic Republic in Commonwealth. So today is actually Pakistan's National Day.
Really, really very interesting events that happened today in history. Now let's take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at these stories making headway on our dailies this morning.
But in a situation where you find that you look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, welcome back. It is now time for the newspaper review, and we also have our reviewer in the studio. The director of News, Voice of Nigeria, Ben Shemang, is here to, you know, dissect or give us his perspectives on the stories on the papers today. Good morning and welcome, sir.
Morning, my pleasure.
Nice to have you once again.
Thank you.
And always.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll start by, you know, we'll start with Daily Trust newspapers today, and the lead here talks about, you know, the APC convention, and ahead of the convention, governors, others plot against Buhari's anointed candidates. Chieftains oppose takeover by CPC men. That's a rider. We also have another rider that says Southwest, Northwest, Borno leaders reject nominees and president governors in crucial meeting today. Well, we can't wait to, find out what the result is after the meeting. And you can find details of the story on page 6. We have Dangote Fertilizer will boost Nigeria's food sufficiency, FX earnings, says Buhari. And a rider that says direct speedy concession of newly commissioned Lagos airport terminals. Others. We also have stories on the footnote there that talks about FG opposes bill seeking free health care for children. Wow. MacArthur Foundation president visits Kano, commissions BUK TV. Crack in Kwankwasia as Top Shots meets Sile Lamido. If you go to the top of the page, you'll find a story that talks about elections. Core members, other ad hoc staff get insurance cover. 2023, Southwest PDP leaders insist on Southern presidency. And these are some of the stories that made it on the front page of Daily Trust newspaper today.
Okay, Mr. Ben, you've not been around, so we had a little switch. You're going to be taking a look at, some of the stories and then talk about them and then move to others.
Okay.
So, really very interesting. The one about the APC Convention, because everywhere right now is all about politics. We are looking forward, to the Saturday's convention, and we are seeing here that governors, others plot against Buhari's anointed candidates.
Anointed. Before all of that, Zainab, you see, we ought to have been seeing flags of APC, in fact, announcing, look, this is the National Convention, the greatest, the biggest of them all corners in Abuja, hotels, so that they tell Nigerians, look, we are here for business. Again, we seen that even the sales of forms, that is taking a kind of a snail's pace. Apart from that, we are also seeing that the screening that ought to be earlier than now, they are still holding it so close to their chests. It's like people shouldn't just know. And only for us to now wake up with this kind of screaming headline, governors are plotting against Buhari's candidates, anointed. It's like the president has already selected whether you like it or not, and the governors are also saying, look, Mr. President, we have a say in this matter. And of course, the issue is that of consensus candidate. Alimodu Sharif, had a former governor of Borno State and the senator then, had an intention to contest. But last week he withdrew his candidacy, saying that it's been zoned to the central part of this country and not eastern part of the country. But again, with the condition that if he realizes that in the end, no more zoning, he will again come back, so to speak. So there is the allegation that Abdullahi Adamu, sitting senator, former governor of Nasarawa State and former Minister of State Power, is the candidate of the president. And people are saying, look, we are also capable of presenting credentials that are sound, and that people will see that they have the capability and ability to bring the party to discipline, ensure that they clinch, hold, and win these elections coming up. So for the governors to say, look, it shouldn't be, of course, that also tells you, in that condition, when you have consensus, there's a provision that says when there are many people contesting, and we now say there is consensus, we have agreed on candidate B or C, then the rest contestants must sign a form that, yes, it happens so time, so place, and we hereby agree to support or step down for this candidate. So if we are seeing the governor saying, Mr. President, no, is the president also saying, governors, no? So where do we reach? So we'll wait and see. Time, as it is said, is a scale.
Yes, well,
it will measure.
there'll actually be a meeting today, or they're in a meeting today, so we'll see what happens there. Now, this particular, ruckus is not just peculiar to the APC. If you look at the headlines, you find out that the PDP are actually having, a whole issue about zoning as well. Now, shouldn't this be the time where a really strong third force comes in, to, stand its ground?
Absolutely. We were seeing a group by the Jegas, we were seeing a group by Padu Tomis, and some other people, even the Concosia group. They all were trying to offer what they call the older alternative. But again, we are also seeing that that group appears to be having some challenges as to who is who. You see people who indeed ordinarily are always hovering around Kwankwaso. They're now meeting with Sule Lamido. So that tells you all is not yet well. But I'm also worried that some of these things tend to be regional in nature. They are either northern group or southern group or southeastern kind of a group, instead of having a holistic and nationalistic kind of approach. And within that context, you can see that PDP is also talking about the zoning. PDP actually started it since 1999 or shortly before 1999, when you said power will rotate, you zone between north and south. And when it comes to the south, I mean, there are also geopolitical zones in the south: southwest, south-south, southeast. When it comes to the north, of course, you have the central part. You also have southeast, you have northwest, so northeast. So how do we just say power should rotate between north and south without taking care of all these zones? And that's why some people are saying in the end we might end up selecting or having regional leaders as opposed to Nigerians who indeed we see every part of Nigeria as their own constituency when it comes to the presidency. Whether it's right, some people will say yes. In terms of Federal Character Commission, every community should be taken care of. But what about the post of the president? People will say, well, Nigeria is not rolling to an end yet. Therefore, people should be patient. If your generation does not have it now, next generation will have, because the nation will not crumble.
Well, Nigerians are on the lookout. Now, there are really very interesting stories on the Daily Trust newspaper. When we talk about economic growth, a lot of people say the government cannot do it alone. And here it seems Dangote is now a hero, as President Muhammadu Buhari is saying his fertilizer would boost Nigeria's food sufficiency and also FX earnings. Is that good news for us?
It's good news for us. But my worry when I was listening to State House correspondent Adamu Sambo, was saying, yeah, they've started exporting some of the fertilizer to even America and this developed world. I was thinking that charity should start from home. And let us have it first. And if we can ensure food security via this fertilizer, why not? And happier thing, I see that it's going to produce urea. Urea mostly is organic fertilizer. And organic fertilizer is environment friendly. It doesn't create this barrenness when you use it in farming. Thereafter, you see that the place, no more grass. Rather, it increases the kind of soil texture, it brings manure, and it brings proper yielding of products. So it's good, and these cases of cancers we've been seeing here and there via chemical fertilizer, organic fertilizer will come to the rescue. And we expect that prices of this commodity fertilizer will crash. Look at the farming population, Zena. The population is so huge and large in this country. But again, this food security will also be challenged by what we're saying, the clashes, farmers and herders are clashes here and there. We should not just be having this fertilizer company and people rush to buy, go farm, and of course in the end your farmland is turned to a battlefield. It shouldn't be. So we expect to that in terms of dry season farming, fertilizer has come, and the time that we'll be talking of import of fertilizer, it has come to an end, so to speak, with this fertilizer company on board. So if we flood Nigeria with this fertilizer, we can farm and rather export the food. But again, let there be security to the farmers, let there be security to the cattle breeders, so that we all will live as one and ensure that we make Nigeria progress.
Well, there's actually one other, story that has actually been going around the papers talking about unemployment, and right here talking about the fertilizer plant. Dangote has actually said that the project will drastically reduce the level of unemployment in the country through the generation of direct and indirect employment.
Absolutely. When you're talking of direct employment, these are people who indeed work in the company itself. But indirect, some drivers somewhere, Maiduguri, you're going to the with trailers, the trains are coming, you pack all of these, put into the trains, take them to the north, take them to the south. Of course, those ones are indirect employments. And of course, you could see that people will open all sorts of shops to sell fertilizers, and farmers too will buy and engage themselves in farmlands. And so you can see it's a whole lot of things that will ensure that our growth is actually accelerating in terms of gross domestic product, because agriculture will propel quite a lot of things, whether in agronomy, you go into gardening, you go into quite a lot of other things. Of course, employment will be that huge, surely, yes.
There's one other story here. It looks quite disturbing, what many would say, although we're going to hear your thoughts on that. The one about federal government opposes bill seeking free health care for our vulnerable, children.
Well, I am just hoping that this headline didn't mean what I am seeing, that it is cast in such a way that it will attract my attention to go and read, only to realize that federal government is actually saying they're going to give free medical care to these children. Because when you say federal government opposes, it's opposing who now? The government is opposing itself, because before now we've been seeing that they said right from infancy state, in fact, right from when a mother is pregnant up to 5 years, they're supposed to receive free medical care. But are they saying that it's now too expensive for them? That is a serious thing that I hope very soon the Minister of Health will be debunking that. They said, no, we were quoted out of context. And usually the weeping dog will be the press. No, the press didn't get it right. When indeed they say things and they realize that they've made a mistake, they've goofed, then they say they've turned out to blame the press. But some press will now bring out what you said, they now bring it out verbatim. So I think that if it is true, they should look at it seriously, because we have diseases, the child killer diseases that are still lurking around. If we don't take care of them, of course, that tells you something. If the children are not well, of course, they can't grow to be well. You don't expect that they will be well in future, when indeed they are not taken care of right from when they were infants. It's always said that the child is the father of the man. Whatever you were as a baby is what you are exhibiting as a man. So we should look at it seriously. Yes.
Well, I think the bill was actually denied or rejected because, they requested for an establishment of some healthcare facilities if they take care of these children. And, there was a complaint that it would increase the cost of governance.
What is governance for? It's to provide, protect. When campaigning, you vowed, you swore, you cajoled, you begged, and said, vote me in, I'll give you health care. Not just health care, proper one. And of course, employment, you said you will provide. Security, you said you will provide. Food security, you said you will provide. So you cannot at this point renege. I said, no, I can no longer do it. If we provide, if this bill scales through, therefore, it's going to tell a lot when it comes to providing facilities to these hospitals for children. So the bill will increase because of that. I mean, so we should just pray that miracles should just be all over the place so that nobody falls sick. But it is said that the moment there is a conception, you have to go for prenatal and postnatal, and thereafter at birth you begin to take all sorts of vaccinations till you reach a certain age. So if the government is saying if this bill passes by, it's going to be a burden, I think that they are not getting it right. I think they should get it right.
Okay, now just before we move on to the next paper, there's this story on page 21 of Daily Trust on City and Crime talking about a 15-year-old girl that was abducted 3 years ago and found 8 months pregnant. Now, police have actually arrested the mom and her son. That's a mother, a woman, and her son over her abduction. Apparently, this particular man lured her when she went out for extramural classes, and he drugged her and defiled her. So, she forgot to go home. And right now she's a drug addict and she's pregnant and living with these people. But they've been arrested right now.
Yeah, you see, that is the anomaly that we are seeing in society. Honestly, if you visit some areas, even in Otako, some primary schools around this area, you'll be shocked the kind of drug addicts around the corner. Go to Lube, there's a primary school there. You see these unusual men just taking Indian hymn publicly. At the point the teachers are worried, can these men go berserk? And this is exactly what has happened here. Situations have come where we see some families selling children to get food to feed some other children. It's a serious matter that the security operative should be on the lookout for them. What really has gone wrong? You lure somebody, pretext by way of showing love to rather mean you don't show this kind of love. And so there has to be some agencies in charge of checking some of these things and arresting, bringing to book some of these things. But again, sometimes the media too, we don't pay attention to the perpetrators. Sometimes we pay so much attention to the victim, which is not right. You begin to know her age, you know her school, her class, and you mention it, you name the street and where they live. That child will grow to live with a kind of a stigma. Society has stigmatized me, so to speak. Whereas we should look at these adults who indeed are perpetrating this, list them out, name and shame them. That's how to fight some of these things via the media.
Really very interesting. Now let's take a look at some more stories on the Punch newspaper this morning. The Punch, on the other hand, does not really have much of political stories. Here it leads with a story about massive job cut looms. Dollar hits 590 naira as forex scarcity bites harder. And then the writers there say we buy over 90% of forex from BDCs. Job losses likely, lament manufacturers. And then banks are saying limit online transactions to $20 per month. Travelers, others patronize BDCs. And then you see other stories also on the top on page 22. Sluggish growth, unemployment, battling Nigeria's poverty reduction. This is according to the World Bank. And you see also the story about oil theft. Federal government probes oil firms over production output. Others. Power Ministry lists obstacles. Reps decry excuses for blackout. And then you see the story about Tambuwal rejects zoning. Southwest PDP insists on Southern presidency. And then you see also a pictorial there that shows you President Muhammadu Buhari and other stakeholders as he also reveals that Dangote's $2.5 billion fertilizer plant will boost food production export. That's according to President Muhammadu Buhari. And then just below that, you'll see the story about ONU promotes indicted ex-FIRO boss demoted by Buhari for PhD fraud. And then on page 4, you see the story about a mother, son arrested for abducting, raping Ekiti SS3 student for 3 years. And then on page 14, Kaduna attack. Police confirm 34 killed, 200 houses burnt, curfew stays. These are some of the major stories on the Punch this morning.
All right, now let's talk about the massive job cuts, as dollar hits 590 naira, due to forex scarcity, biting harder.
Absolutely. But you see, let's take from the last one up to that unemployment thing,
Okay.
like the attacks in Kaduna State. This didn't happen in Kaguru, Agban area, struck the roundabout close to Government College Kaguru, and you descend, you go to College of Education Gidanwaya. And the stories we're getting is that some people just station machine guns. They were just having some shooting spree. Some people were looting. Well, some were setting houses, markets on fire. And of course, some military personnel were lost in that attack, which means that the people must have monitored the situation and probably saw how armed or less armed or fewer security personnel on ground before they could launch those attacks. I mean, it was well calculated and well planned and executed, which means that it was deliberately done. And it happened just when Fulani people, Kagoro people had signed an agreement, as I was told, to live in peace. But here we are, those who don't mean well for society. See what has happened. So we're saying some coppers, someone has sent a message in my office. My father was involved, I'm going for burial. So this kind of a thing. And of course, that also tells you, in terms of unemployment, if a market is raised down, the informal sector of the economy is already affected, so to speak. And of course, when you begin to see a refinery of this nature, how much does it cost to build all that? Thank God it's just been commissioned before this rise in the dollar price. But you look at the purchasing power of Nigerians. If Manufacturers Association of Nigeria has said, look, companies will have to shut down, of course that tells you people will be sent to the unemployed market, because companies are not producing as installed capacity. Why? There's no electricity. Okay, the next option is let's go for diesel. There's no diesel. Okay, let's try electricity and petrol. There is no petrol. So you can see that there's this boomeranging, it's a chain effect. That once this thing happens, it pulls the other pulls the other. You can now see in a line like this, we have all sorts of problems. If there's no light, of course, even the labs in the hospitals will not work. So socially, that affects, because that's service delivery, that one. If you're talking of hotels, they will not be working, because who wants to relax in a hot environment? You're talking of the informal sector of the economy. Even the barber shop, those who are involved in some hairdressing, the salons, you're talking of tailors, you're talking of welders. I mean, they don't have light. So what happens, you just see people are so relaxed, waiting. Is it till thine kingdom come? We pray that it's not till thine kingdom come. We also pray that since the political arena is becoming charged, we want to see who indeed will raise up. I've not seen people saying, vote for me, we'll give you light. Because PDP has tried, APC is still trying. I mean, do we still have it? In view of the long story, about 40 years, Mambila electricity project there, close to 40 years, there's no electricity from that place. Every regime will come, look at it, And so we expect that politicians should not just should not just be promising. And we, the media, we should always be asking how. When they say we are going to give you light, we are going to give you security, ask this question: how? How do you do it? Now we're talking of the dwindling fortune of the economy. The economy is nose diving. There is the north wind blowing us, pushing us backwards. When you promise heaven and earth, the question is, how do you do it? Where do you get the money from? The same oil that is going down in terms of price, so it's a serious matter.
Just before we wrap up this particular paper, we also have a story of federal government probing oil firms over production, output, and others due to oil theft. Just to link it and all that. Talking about unemployment, the World Bank has also said that the sluggish growth and unemployment is battling Nigeria's poverty reduction.
The days of the Niger Delta crisis, oil theft, crude oil theft, was so serious, very, very serious, that at the point, the war in Sierra Leone, Liberia, because of diamond activities there, the world decided to tag it as a blood diamond. That you don't just come to the diamond market and sell. We want to know where it's coming from. It was traceable, and they stopped buying that kind of blood diamond. And the war ended so sharp, so in a very quick manner. At the point, Jonathan, then President Goodluck Jonathan, said, look, can we also tag crude oil theft as blood
oil?
Exactly, blood oil, so that you don't just see people coming with crude oil and you just collect, refine, and sell to the world. So when some companies will take this volume of crude oil, they underwrite. If you took so barrels, why are you giving a little for it? Yet you have taken a value for it. It's a thing that the Navy should come in, NEMASA should come in, all agencies within the creeks, all agencies in charge of the waters, territorial waters, should look at. And the World Bank also talking about unemployment. It is serious, as in serious, because the World Food Project is warning of hunger. Even though we are seeing Dangote, a fertilizer company, coming on board, there are still things to be done. Look at the felling of trees people are doing. You now see trailers carrying logs of wood into cities to come and sell as fuel fire. I mean, to be used for cooking. So that tells you something is going wrong with our forests. So deforestation is serious, and we expect that some agencies, that's why we're talking of traditional rulers also playing their role. You have all sorts of title holders who are in charge of areas, the forests, even waters, to protect them. We had World Water Day, where water supply is a problem. Now we're cutting down the trees. Of course, the environment will become so hot that even the water that is underground will be going deeper down there. In the end, you just see people migrating to where? Only God knows. You see some places, probably in the Niger Delta area, much population will be moving from north southwards. In fact, people should be schooled. In particular, I see that some cattle breeders, you just climb some trees and cut down the branches, because the cows will need the leaves. So why don't you allow these leaves to drop and the cows will eat, and the tree will still be there? And that will also bring in some rain, because if we don't have some cloudy areas with thick forest or forest, of course rainfall will not be there. And so people will have to be schooled on protecting the environment. If we leave, the animals will leave, human beings will leave, and we progress.
All right, let's move on to the next paper, which is the Guardian newspaper. And we have the lead here talking about APC throws screening open to all chairmanship aspirants, and writers that say fears exclusion could lead to litigations, Yari warns President Buhari against imposition and party to rake in 1 billion naira from sale of forms. We also have at the top there 418 million Africans in need as World Max Water Day. Southwest PDP leaders insist next president must come from South. Federal government hails Dangote hopeful of $400 million inflow from fertilizer export. Truckers threaten to increase haulage charges over diesel crisis. And if you come to the bottom there, you have get power before sharing it, Tambuwal tells PDP, and also that scandalous pageantry at Kirikiri prison. These are some of the stories on the Guardian newspaper.
Former Governor Yari warns Buhari, not even advises, warns Buhari over party politics, over APC, particularly this convention. Now, why won't President Buhari take his own actions? We all are witnesses. You see governors having problems, all they do is to rush to the president, provide solution, provide solution. Now the president is providing his own solution to the best of his capability and ability. Now you say no, he shouldn't be. So why did you go looking for advice from him? Then Tambuwal saying, get power before you even share it and all that. I thought that in terms of plotting, planning to go into a contest, when you have people of like minds from all the geopolitical zones, you should be able, right from the word go, plot it in such a way that, look, let's do it this way. If you are going into the zoning system, this zone, take this post. This one, take that. This one, take that. And based on that, people are satisfied, and armed with that, we fight as a team. When I say fight, I mean we contest as a team to win. But a situation where you say, no, let us win first before we share. I think it's not good politicking, it's not good plotting towards an acceptable goal. No, I think that they should share positions right from and that's why people fall apart easily. The moment you don't share it before you contest, you wait, okay, let us contest and win. From there we share. Some people who sink in so much money would not be reckoned with. Some people didn't have the money, but in terms of influence and having followership, yes, they have it. And they bring all sorts of people, all sorts of voters, all sorts of members to the party. Now you're sharing posts because you have won, okay, they can go to hell. And that's why you can see that APC tends to have some problems now, because look at the way they came on board. You have All Progressives Grand Alliance, you have CPC, Rochas Okorocha and Co. came from CPC, ABGA, CPC, you have President Buhari, El Rufai and Co., that's CPC. You also have Asiwaju Tinubu coming from Congress Alliance. So they all fused together to form APC. Now some factions are feeling that, look, only one of this fusion, only one part is being taken care of. And that's why you've seen that this combustion, confusion, the parties be having a hit within. Well, I hope that they will have good masters of the act that will ensure that the party does not face a crisis.
Okay, let's take a look at other stories on the Nation newspaper quickly before we wrap up this segment of the program. You see the story about PDP quakes over zoning. Let's focus on getting power, says Tambuwal. Party's Southwest leaders insist on power shift. You see also the story on page 4, right at the top. I inherited 100 billion naira debt, says Soludo. Treasury pathetic. You see also the story about MBA warning against reckless court rulings. Senate to debate verdict. And then on page 27 on the Nation newspaper, Akeredolu decries invasion of OAU by traditionalists. Oyetola met 200 billion naira debt, says DMO. I think these are some of the major stories on the Nation newspaper. Now, Soludo, who is just, who was just being sworn in, says he already met 100 billion naira debt, says the treasury is pathetic. Is this so?
Well, I hope the battle has not just started too early, because we've seen governors who, indeed, as soon as they leave, even when they helped their successors to come on board, they start fighting so easily. Soludo is saying that in terms of cash in treasury, he only found 300 million naira in the treasury, whereas the debt profile is so high, it is in hundreds of billions. Well, no wonder the EFCC is already trailing the governor. He's facing some questioning. I can imagine just an hour after being sworn in, you are already checking out of the country. I mean, why should we go to a place where we feel that they are better there? Let me go and relax. If you are sure your country is better, you are sure your state is better, you are sure your local government, your ward is better, and you build your own house there, why don't you stay there? Because you served the people. Therefore, the people should be proud of you. You should walk in the streets so free a citizen. But when you are in a haste to run away, I think something is wrong somewhere. It shouldn't be. And that huge debt profile, can we match what was the money for? Can we match the money, the figure, versus job done or progress of work going on? So it's a very big problem that that is common with governors. So they shouldn't just play that kind of politics of empty treasury syndrome. It shouldn't be at all. Because when you collect money, what are you supposed to use it for? Provide service to people as you campaign. That's the way out. Nothing else. So that's why when politicians come on board, you carry this Bible, carry the Quran, swear by it that you do justice to all manner of people, irrespective of where they come from, religion or creed. But see what is happening. I once had an encounter with Professor Yowande Bimbola. He used to be UIVC. Every time students were supposed to go on strike, that university will not go on strike. He said, what's happening? I asked him the secret. He said, look, I was using my Sangoten, I was using native this. And that was why when he came to be advisor to President Muhammadu Buhari, Obasanjo, on traditional religion and culture, the man said, tell these people to swear by some deities. You see that they will run away. But we have a big God that is so merciful. But when you swear to some other deities, the moment you commit, the dream strikes you down. So that was to the extreme. But honestly, I think that the holy books we are using to swear is like we are taking God to be one simple in-law that we can toy with. No, it shouldn't be.
All right, talking about tradition, we have a story that says Akere Dolu decries invasion of OAU by traditionalists.
I won't be surprised. Look at cultists here and there and campuses. And even secondary schools, we find out that cultists are invading. You find some who say they belong to secret cult. We had a reason. You see some core members, they said they are being pursued by cultists because they belong to some cultists when they were in a university or institutions of higher learning. And so one will not be surprised that this is coming from a very high-profile government official lamenting. And it means that I think we are not getting some things right when it comes to beliefs. Do beliefs simply mean that we have to kill people? Yes, I mean, sacrifices, even the ones you saw we know in the holy books, they were always using rams. They saw that the rams were better. So, but why do we want to sacrifice fellow human beings for cultism, secret cults? Look at in hotels, once they said somebody is dead, in particular the ladies, with due respect, they said vital parts have been removed. Why is it always so? Even the hoteliers, they have an association. They have to blacklist some hotels when these things are come on board. And they also have to do thorough profiling of who indeed has come from us, from where to where. There has to be even ID cards. I mean, each time I go to some Lagos around Ikoyi, at the point they say, Oga, do you mind if we photocopy your ID card? I said, no, I don't mind. Photocopy. So they will do that and keep. I said, after all, you won't find a visitor in my room. So, and honestly, the hoteliers should also ensure that their union, they don't use hotels for this kind of clandestine activities. Recall what happened with the postgraduate student of UI, somewhere in the southwest again. Many other places like that. It shouldn't be. Centers of learning should be centers of science and technology, not centers of clandestine activities. Centers of learning, centers of excellence should just be places of research, so that we solve human problems, rather than saying if you get so parts, you're going to be rich. You can be rich via agriculture. Of course, we're talking of agronomy. We should do research in those areas and become rich, rather than believing that if you get pregnant woman, get the fetus, this is how you become rich. No, it shouldn't be. And that's why I support Lai Mohammed when they said that they want to look at these scenes that portray ritual for money in films. Some people will believe it, and wrongly too. And so I think that the government should take up arms against this. When I say arms, they should be up and doing.
All right, I think with that, we will wrap up the newspaper review. Thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your perspectives on all these stories.
My pleasure. Thank you, as usual.
All right, so, that was Director of News, Voice of Nigeria, Ben Shemang, in the studio with us. We'll definitely be seeing him again sometime this week. But then we'll take a quick breather, and when we come back, it'll be time for our first discussion. You're still watching Daybreak on Trust TV. Do stay.
Coronavirus disease, COVID-19, is an infectious disease caused by SARS-CoV-2 virus. Most people who fall sick with COVID-19 will experience mild to moderate symptoms and recover without special treatment. However, some will become seriously ill and require medical attention. The virus can spread from an infected person's mouth or nose in small liquid particles when they cough, sneeze, speak, sing, or breathe. These particles range from larger respiratory droplets to smaller aerosols. You can be infected by breathing in the virus if you're near someone who has COVID-19 or by touching a contaminated surface and then touching your eyes, nose, or mouth. The virus spreads more easily indoors and in crowded settings. Maintain a safe distance from others at least 2 meters even if they don't appear to be sick. Wear a mask in public, especially indoors or when physical distancing is not possible. Clean your hands often. Use soap and water or an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. Cover your nose and mouth with your bent elbow or a tissue when you cough or sneeze. Stay home if you feel unwell. Get vaccinated. Properly fitted masks can help prevent the spread of the virus from the person wearing the mask to others. Masks alone do not protect against COVID-19 and should be combined with physical distancing and hand hygiene. Protect yourself and others around you by knowing the facts and taking appropriate precautions. Follow advice provided by your local health authority. This message is brought to you by Trust TV.
This is Trust TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
All right, welcome back. Moving on to our first discussion. Nigeria's foreign policy can be traced to periods of the country's existence. Now, these periods are the colonial period and the post-colonial period as well. The colonial period between 1914 and 1960 is when the entity called Nigeria came into existence as a united nation, even though the country was still under colonial rule. The post-colonial period is from independence in 1960 till date. Now, the post-colonial period saw the formation of the indigenous foreign policy that was truly called Nigerian foreign policy. And right here in the studio, we have a career diplomat in the studio, the author of the book titled With Heart and Might, Ambassador Mk Ibrahim. He joins us to share his 33 years experience in the Nigerian diplomatic service. Good morning and welcome to Daybreak.
Thank you very much.
It's nice to have you on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me. This will be the first interview I'm having since the launch of my book.
Oh, very interesting.
Great.
Now, before we go into, your book, 33 years, that's quite a very long time, isn't it? Could you share your experience with us through this time?
Well, that's a big challenge to summarize 33 years in 5 minutes. I wish I could attempt that. But just like many things in Nigeria, I found myself in the diplomatic service, probably by accident. When I graduated from the university in 1977, I had about 6 jobs waiting for me.
Wow.
And among these 6 jobs, my ambition as a youth at that time were either to be a journalist, a banker, or a diplomat. And by coincidence, among the 6 offers that I got, these 3 were among them. And now it was a question of trying to choose one among the 3. And I had to go through prayers, asking my parents to help me choose one, which they couldn't. But by coincidence, I started with journalism, and within 1 month, I found that it was not a career that I should pursue.
Oh, no.
It was during the military regime, and one journalist got his head, shaved off by Obasanjo at that period.
Wow.
And my only impression of journalism was I was thinking like the journalists in Washington,
Where there's democracy.
Yes, where you have the freedom of writing, freedom of expression,
Right.
writing things as long as you stay within the rules, of journalism.
Right.
But, I said, no, I wouldn't like anyone to share my hair. So I left that one and I went to banking. And within 1 month, I found myself in police cell.
My goodness.
We made a payment.
What an experience.
Yeah. We made a payment that shouldn't have been made.
Oh,
You
wow.
know, it was a contractor who did the job for 20,000 naira, and at that time, 20,000
big
naira
money.
was more than $20,000. You know, so I approved that he should be paid. I didn't know that the check had been stopped. You know, after he had been paid, then we discovered that I shouldn't have authorized the payment.
Wow.
Well, eventually it went to the police, and I was taken to the cell with 3 other people. Immediately, the case was resolved. The money was returned. I said bye-bye. And then I came to the diplomatic service. Incidentally, I reported at the ministry on the last day, 30th of August, 1978. That was the closing date for newly recruited foreign service officers. I managed to make it, so you can see a lot of...
Quite an experience.
Yes, indeed. All right, now the title of your book is With Heart and Might, and we know, book titles actually, or titles actually play a huge role, in, for authors. What influenced, that particular title?
I tell you, I had toyed with not less than 100 titles. And how this one came to me was like an inspiration, something coming from somewhere. It is from the national anthem of Nigeria, the second stanza, to serve your country with heart and might. So many people, when they see heart and might, they keep wondering, why did I hear this, even though they have been reciting the national anthem every day?
Indeed.
So in essence, this is to say that I have served my country with my heart and my mind, with all my abilities, in spite of the difficulty, the obstacle, the pains. I did my best for my country, and I am proud of that.
Okay. All right, so now let's take a look at, this particular book which you launched a few days ago. And in chapter 3, specifically, you talked about the military rule and the transition to democracy in 1979. And the book also talked about how the long period of military took its toll on the civil service generally. Now, considering the kind of civil service we have now, do you think we're still suffering from the hangover of the military era?
Well, a lot in many areas. The civil service is supposed to be guided by rules. When I joined the service and before my time, one of the biggest attributes of the service was security of tenure. You know that you will be having your job unless you have done something that is serious, that is considered as a serious misconduct. Nobody will come overnight and throw you out. Even when you commit an offense, you are given an opportunity, to defend yourself. You are given a query, you answer the query, a panel will sit down, and until you are adjudged that you are guilty of what you are being charged before an appropriate punishment was meted on you. When the military came, it was a different thing. For the first time, Nigerians were hearing with immediate effect. Actions were taken with immediate effect, without due consultation, without being guided by the rules, and people were shocked. And in many ways, that brought corruption. That was the beginning of corruption in the civil service. People tried to help themselves, and so they thought that we have to do something before our retirement. Then you are sure you will work up to the age of 60 or so, you will retire, you will get your pension, and you will leave the service happily, But all of a sudden, there's a new development that one young officer, maybe a major or a colonel, will just come in the morning and you say you are retired. or you will just hear on the radio that these names mentioned on the radio, these officers have been terminated with immediate effect. And people try now to get their pension while they are still in the service. You try to get your gratuity while you are still in the service because they are no longer security obtainable. The military regime is gone. We are now in a democracy, but still the same thing is happening, especially in state governments. Decisions were taken to retire, to send off, to reduce the number of civil servants without due consideration to the rules, of procedures. I think it is important that we go back to the practice in the past. It's a kind of contractual obligation between the employer and the employee. And if that is no longer kept, then confidence is lost.
Okay. Really, really very interesting. Now, still in your book, on page 60, the book talked about Nigerian foreign policy between 1960 and 1966, which was, quite conservative. Now, in your assessment, is there a difference, between successive governments with regard to bilateral relations with other countries? What was it like?
Well, the differences are not much. One could probably excuse the First Republic leaders because they were barely 6 years in government and they are new. Nigeria was a very young nation. Most of them had modest education, but very, very patriotic. That's the major difference between the Tafawa Balewa leaders and then today. Now politicians come with letters in their name, PhD, this and that, but their productivity is much lower than the First Republic politicians. The difference was patriotism. These people walked with their heart and might, probably, if I would say so.
Title of the book.
As against what we are having, today. And another reason is they are not as exposed as our leaders of today. They only knew the British system, British colonizers. The educational background was purely British. Their contact and exposure was purely British. So it was understandable if in their action they only thought of British way of doing things. So that was how the First Republic politicians found themselves. For example, in 1958, 2 years before our independence, we agreed to sign the Anglo-Nigerian Defense Pact, even before our independence. And it was one of the agreements signed before as a condition for our independence. The Defense Pact meant allowing the British to have a base in Nigeria, and in two places in particular, Lagos and Kano, air base in Kano, and naval and the ground troops, in Lagos. But immediately after independence, Nigeria, and in particular because of the reaction of students, they didn't want Nigeria to be a base of any colonial power. They wanted Nigeria to play its neutrality in its foreign policy, to be non-aligned. Because of pressure imposed on the government, mainly by students, we had to abrogate the pact. So it wasn't easy, for them at that time, but it had to be done because of pressure from students and other the newspapers and people with radical views. In a sense, that was good, because as early as that period, what meant was we had a government that was listening to the reaction, was listening to the voice of the people. Probably if this had happened today, you know, with all the opposition, with all the complaints, with all the cries of people, it would not have the same effect as it did immediately after independence, which is to say that the government at that time was probably more responsive, you know, than probably what we have today.
Oh, you know, you talked about, you know, patriotism back in the days and what we have now. A lot of people, you agree with me, that a lot of Nigerians are not patriotic anymore. In your assessment, what really has changed? What has changed about, you know, patriotism?
Many things. My first diplomatic posting was to the Soviet Union. And the first thing I found then was children as early as the age of 3 were taken away every year for a few months from their parents. They are called the young communists. They were taught the value of loving their country. There were national values. They were taught to make sacrifice for their countries. They were taught to believe that the country would take care of them, that the country is worth dying for, that your country is more than anything, is above anything. In the case of Soviet Union at that time, it was even beyond religion or even God. It was country, motherland. And once you grow up with that in your mind, call it propaganda, call it whatever, and you see the government also doing something for you. They had free education, you are guaranteed a job, you are guaranteed a house, but it was a kind of a contract between you and the state. While the state had to discharge its own part of the contract, you as a citizen also had your own to discharge. I'm talking about the former Soviet Union. And later, many years, when I went to Sweden, that's not a communist government, it's a very liberal country, but again, different from other Western countries. People were willing to pay as much as 70% of their income as tax for the state. People were willing to make all kinds of sacrifice. On the side of the government has responsibility to take care of its citizens from cradle to grave. In fact, most Swedes look forward with pleasure to the age of retirement. You know, you will have your house, you will have good medical treatment. At a certain stage, those who are terminally ill in Sweden, they move to a hospital closer to their houses, where with just you press a button, 2 or 3 doctors will come, no matter what time it is. So you have no regret whatever you have done for your country. And the young ones, when they see that, they know it is worth doing everything, even if it means paying the ultimate price for the nation. I'm afraid it's not the same thing in our country. There are people who have made all kinds of sacrifice, including their lives. I have written in this book some of my colleagues who had died on active service in a plane crash, almost 20 of them. And there's no place, even within our ministry, a plague where their names are listed to say these people paid the ultimate price in the service of the nation. In fact, so sad, a child of 1 of those who died came to the ministry. He wanted to see a permanent secretary. And the wife came with the son of one of the deceased, and they were not even allowed to go into the ministry. She was asked, do you have an appointment? He said, no. He said, but my husband died in a plane crash while serving the nation. He was a staff in this ministry. The poor security people at the gate, madam, you have no appointment, you have no appointment. Go and get an appointment. Well, this is not to say this happens every day. This could be an extreme example, but this is the reality. You go to every establishment, whether government or even the private sector, you find this kind of experiences from these workers. And that does not encourage people to be patriotic. So if you want patriotic, then patriotism from the citizens, then the government also has a responsibility, to instill in the minds of the people that for hard work, for patriotism, the government will, on its part, make sure that you live a decent life. You have no cause to regret.
Okay. Okay, now, over the years, Nigeria's foreign policy has actually been marred by image crisis nationally and internationally. How do you think we can actually salvage it?
I thank you for asking this question. During the launch of my book, I thought I would have the opportunity, to raise certain critical issues. I couldn't raise these issues, but one of them was a question of image of Nigeria. When I was a student, I traveled to UK a couple of times. I didn't have to go for visa interview with the British High Commission or British Council. The university just collected our passports, took to the British Council. They gave us visa, we went, and came back. And many Nigerians will remember when they used to get visa at the airports of many countries on arrival. Things have changed a great deal. And unfortunately, this issue is mainly due to attitudes, of Nigerians themselves. Now, when I joined the service in the foreign ministry at post, we had officers who were doing economic issues, trade matters, political matters, military. But now, everybody from the ambassador, who is the highest official there, to the lowest person, is engaged in consular responsibilities. What is this consular responsibilities? Nigerians are in jail here. Nigerians are involved in one kind of crime or the other, financial crime, money laundering, and all kinds of things. That is why everybody is involved. My last posting was Libya. And believe me, every day, we had to deal with cases of Nigerians taking the risk of crossing the desert and then taking even greater risk of going through the Mediterranean, to an island in Italy. More than 70% of those embarking on this journey die. But that is not enough to discourage people. And if you go to Southeast Asia today, you find that majority of those who are in prison on drug issues, are Nigerians. It is so bad that in many countries, Nigerians are not even given the benefit of the doubt. In other places, you commit an offense, they will look at it and see whether their intention in doing it, is it true that you have committed this offense? But once you are in Nigeria now, you are not even given this benefit of the doubt. It's really, really so sad. In the diplomatic service, we are selling our country. We want our country to look good. But unfortunately, if your product is bad, there's very little you can do. You may succeed in selling to 1 or 2 people, but by the time they start using this product, they find that it's not good enough. It's an example of the kind of challenge that we have. This is beyond the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, probably beyond even the government itself. It has to do with every Nigerian. It has to do with the government, it has to do with religious institutions, it has to do with academic institutions, it has to do with our judiciary, it has to do with our politicians. We must sit down and ask ourselves these questions. How do we regain the respect that we had? How? How do we do it? It's a big question.
All right, now, what's your take on China, Nigeria, or even Africa's relationship? Because a lot of people seem to think that, Nigeria is mortgaging its future to, China.
Well, I'm not an expert on China, even though I had served in Hong Kong, which is now part of China. I was a consul general in Hong Kong. But in international relations, it's all the same thing, whether it's China or you're referring to the United States, You look at your national interest in whatever you are doing. It's not a blind game. It's not a zero-sum game. You look at your interest. As long as your action is based on your national interest, even where there is an error, there will always be a room to rectify this error. In international relations, you deal with other states, it's give and take. If China is giving you a loan, they are not doing it because they love you, per se, but they also have their national interest. You look at your own national interest also. There's nothing bad in taking the loan, but what do you use the loan for? I'm a retired person, and probably I have the privilege, of speaking my mind. I know we have borrowed a lot of money to build, trains. When we were kids, there was a train in Nigeria, and those who are driving this train were Nigerians, either coal or I don't know whatever they were doing to power this train, but they were Nigerians. 60, 70 years later, now we borrowed money to build, railways, and we have trains. But I see Chinese driving this train. What is there in driving a train? That you have to get Chinese driving train, which Nigerians were doing 70, 80 years ago. Even Nigerians can fly aircraft, fighter jets, but they cannot drive train that is on a track, one way, like that. For goodness sake, there is something wrong. If you sign a contract which says, we're lending you 10 million naira, we're going to provide you with a certain machine, but my people will operate this machine. If you accept this, it means you are depriving your people also the opportunity. You can't be fighting unemployment while you are signing this kind of contract. Unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that we see.
I would like for you to share this experience. There's a particular chapter in your book, I think chapter 4, where you talked about your experience with Ambassador Ukebu. Now, according to you, you went into prayers to seek Allah's protection. Talk to us about that.
No, I think, well, for those of us who are brought up, and I have mentioned it in the book, you think that even issue that should be done by you as a human being, you push it to the Almighty to do it for you, which is not bad as long as you are doing it faithfully and believing that you are doing the right thing. The permanent secretary, I had never met him, but he summoned me, and when I faced him, he called me a communist. And that was a very, very serious charge in those days. It's as good as someone now calling you a terrorist. You know, but while I was in the university, I was in a socialist club. And indeed, I was the secretary general of that, club. So somehow, the permanent secretary wanted, to send me to Soviet Union, Moscow. And they thought that the best person to send there was someone who has that kind of, thinking, someone who has this kind of ideological framework, And they looked around and said, oh, this guy will be very good for that place. But he didn't tell me why he wanted me. And immediately I saw him, he came out with this charge, you are a communist. And I thought that was the end of my career. And you recall I told you that I tried journalism. I had to leave. I went to the bank. I said, oh my God, that is the end of this one, So Ukegu was a very, very tough permanent secretary. People were dead scared of him, So when I heard he wanted to see me, I had to pray, and immediately I went in. I had to pray again to disable whatever intention he had, bad intention he had against me. It worked well anyway, finally.
All right, now, just before we go on a quick break, could you share experience with us? You were actually part of a delegation with the late head of state back then, General Sani Abacha, in March 1994 to New Delhi in India. Just share your experience with us.
Thank you. There are a lot of lessons to learn from that trip. And I think these lessons are still very, very important. Abacha, when he became president, unlike many other presidents for quite some time, he did not leave Nigeria. He just stayed. And the trip to New Delhi was his first trip. And it was a conference, South-South conference of 15 countries. And there are a lot of documents, to read. And the president needed, the head of state needed to be briefed thoroughly because he will meet his counterparts to discuss these issues. And we thought on our way, we couldn't find the opportunity to sit with him and brief him while in Nigeria because of so many constraints. But on the plane from Jeddah, which was a transit point to New Delhi, about 6 hours, it was arranged that we will sit and brief him. There were about 7 ministers on the plane. And he came out, the ministers came, each one of them with his file, briefing notes, and those of us who were the staff, stayed behind to take notes or to chip in something. And we started this briefing. 10 minutes after, General Abacha just got up. He didn't tell anybody anything. He just went, he just went to his private room in the plane. And the ministers who waited 30 minutes, 1 hour, Abacha didn't show up. And we knew he was not likely to come back, So the ministers were tired. and they went back to their seat and were asked, to go and sit and watch out. Anytime Abacha is coming out, go and call me. And he didn't come out until when it was announced that the plane was descending. Well, the following day, the meeting started. And of course, without proper briefing, no matter how hardworking, intelligent, the head of delegation is, will be missing certain points. Why I'm saying that there is a lesson to learn, and it still happens. When Nigeria goes for international meetings, normally our heads of delegations are not properly briefed. One of the presidents, from my own experience, that I will give praise to was President Yaradua. President Yaradua would sit down with you and ask questions. In fact, you dare not go to President Yaradua for briefing without doing your homework, because he will ask you vital questions. He will ask you, what is Nigeria's position? What is the position of South Africa? What is the position of Egypt? Why do you think we are taking this position? He will put you on the spot. The first time we did that, everybody knew that we had a president who would not be taken for granted. And from the minister to the officers, everybody started doing a very, very serious job. Unfortunately, this tradition has not been sustained, because every head of state, every president has his own way of handling matters. But may his soul rest in peace. Yaradua was a great person in terms of listening, asking questions, and preparing himself well, for international conferences.
Thank you so much for coming to the program this morning. Unfortunately, we have to stop here.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that was, a really, really interesting one. Really, really interesting, I must say. And we just finished interviewing a career diplomat, the author of the book titled With Heart and Might, Ambassador Mk Ibrahim. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back briefly.
right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, you're still watching Daybreak on Trust Television. Now, let's take a look at some more perspectives on the program this morning. The Central Bank of Nigeria has projected that the Nigerian economy will grow by 3.24% in 2022, in spite of rising inflationary challenges occasioned by global socio-economic events. Godwin Emefiele, the CBN governor, while presenting a communique from the Apex Bank's Monetary Policy Committee meeting on Monday, said the International Monetary Fund also projected the economy to grow at 2.7%, while the federal government projected a 4.21% growth. Emefiele, however, said the MPC was concerned about the impact the global increase in petroleum and other products was having on the Nigerian economy. The Central Bank of Nigeria, however, retained the monetary policy rate at 11.5% as the country grapples with a high inflation rate and fuel scarcity. Now, joining us virtually from Lagos, we have financial analyst Mukhtar Mohammed. Good morning, Mukhtar.
Good morning, Abuja.
You on the program this morning.
Thank you so much.
Okay, now the Central Bank of the monetary policy rate standing at 11.5%. You know, as our country grapples with high inflation, is that really good for us?
Well, you know, you have a monster, and that monster is inflation, and you need to fight that monster. And sometimes, if you look at the variables, like the CBN governors said, we're battling a lot of issues, especially in the hike in petroleum product price globally. Also, then we are battling internal issues also in terms of insecurity, and then food shortage also, you could say. So it's a big challenge, and so I think for now they needed to leave the rate at that to see how they can deal with the inflationary pressure, because this current inflationary pressure is not just coming from inflation. You could have inflationary pressure due to market sentiment. I mean, market indices. You could have inflationary pressure due to economic indices. You can have inflationary pressure due to production indices. But in this our own case, you are seeing the three coming. We have microeconomic inflation, we have production inflation, and then we also have market inflation. So it's three all coming together at a time. So for you to address those issues, you need to begin to look at what should be done, especially in key sectors. And I think that's why the CBN is leaving the rate as it is now, so that with that rate, we've been seeing a little bit of improvement. But there we see those challenges in the inflation figures because of what we saw in the hike, especially in the price of diesel.
Okay. Now, CBN, retained its MPR and other parameters, leaving the status quo unchanged despite, inflationary pressure. Can you, share your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think they had to do that because that's what has been working for them thus far. They don't need to change it, because what are you gonna? If you try to change it, you try to bring increased rate, then the cost of borrowing will go high, and that will also hit the production, such as the manufacturing sector, and then that will crumple a lot of economy. May even through move Nigerians into the labor market. Remember also the major pressure they're also facing, the pressure of the exchange rate volatility, especially the parallel market, and meeting demands and supply. So all these are situations that they needed to address, and so for them to do that, they need to leave the rate as it is now, because any change in that rate is going to cause a very big destruction to the system, especially in the manufacturing sector. So I think that's why they are leaving the rate at that. Also, the microeconomic situation as it stands now, with the war in Ukraine, also you need to begin to look at production, and then that's why the CBN governor was saying that we have massive thief in terms of our oil, and so those are security challenges that I think the government should deal with if we will be able to couple with the kind of challenges that we may have going forward, especially if this war does not stop anytime soon.
But are we seeing a reflection of this in the economy?
Well, if you look at the private sector, you could see that reflection, because you could see the credit to the private sector increased by 4.2%. And so you could see that. But, when it comes to the economy, you don't begin to see those results coming out very soon, because it's more or less like building a foundation. And sometimes this economic problem that we are facing, it don't just happen overnight, and so they will not be solved overnight. So it more or less like you won't see those numbers coming up soon as you thought, but by the second to third quarter, we'll begin to see those numbers begin to play out. So for now, you won't see those effects, especially in the cost of goods and services. And like I said, we are governing with market-induced inflation and production-induced inflation. Market-induced inflation has to do with demand and supply. The demand is still there, the supply is still low, especially for food products because of the insecurity. The production-induced inflation is the cost of production of goods and services has gone up because the cost of some of the equipment also, and also the cost of diesel also have gone up. So that increased the production cost. And when those happen, you see them is the consumer that will bear the brunt. So that's what we are seeing definitely playing out now.
Okay. Now, what about the growth projection contradiction between the CBN, the IMF, and the federal government of 3.25%, 2.7%, and 4.5%? What criteria are we actually using, really?
I think that's what we keep saying, that there's no synergy, especially between the micro and the fiscal authority, because we are supposed to be on the same page, especially the federal government and the CBN. If you look at what is happening in the current administration, you see the CBN begin to do their microeconomic issues, they dabble into fiscal policy so that those results will show. Then the fiscal side are also doing their own projection. So I think we are not on the same page, and that has been the challenge that we've seen, especially in this administration, when it comes to managing our economy. There seems to be a lot of overlapping effect, and nobody's trying to address it. So I'm surprised that the federal government looking at 4 point something, the CBN is looking at, the IMF looking at 2, and the CBN is looking at 3. So you could see that the contradiction in terms of numbers are very far apart. So I expect that the central bank and the federal government should have been on the same page, especially when you're at the monitoring side and you're the physical side. But unfortunately, we are not seeing that. And that has to do with data. It has to do with the data available to each other. And that means they may not be shared vision, and they may not be sharing the data within themselves. That could just be the challenge.
So, Muktar, this is quite away from what we've been speaking about. We're also seeing that there are massive job losses, as dollar hits 590 naira, as forest scarcity bites harder. Is this good for our economy in any way?
It can never be good for our economy when you are having massive job loss. So definitely it's not good for the economy, especially when these job losses are coming from them. Our youths are the ones that are majorly being affected by this job loss. It's not good for the economy, and we've been saying it that the CBN need to come up with products that will attract foreign investment, will attract us to get FX into our system. So we are an economy that is driven by most of our goods are imported. And so we'll continue to brush those challenges, especially when the challenge we have with the parallel market going to as far as 590 is that those people that the Bureau de Change used to address, those sectors that the Bureau de Change used to meet their demands, the sectors have not been taken care by the CBN. So we'll continue to have this challenge. We'll see this rate goes up. Even if you say, what are the criteria, what are the reasons? Because if you look at the import-export window, which is supposed to be the official windows of the FA, you could see the difference is very, very wide. And then, but you ask yourself, how many manufacturers, how many Nigerians, how many SMEs will be able to get FS from the import and export window? Very few. So there goes again. We still go with the same economic challenges that we always talked about: demand and supply. We've seen supply is low, but demand is high. So definitely, we'll continue to see this rate goes up. Hopefully, we believe that when the election approach and when we will see a lot of politicians bringing out some of this money that we think they are keeping, maybe we could see the rate come down. But for now, it's a huge challenge. And up to this moment, the CBN have not really addressed the FX issues, because they are facing two monsters here. They have the FX challenge to meet up with, and they also have the inflation. And those are why we keep saying that the CBN should face their monetary policy instead of diving into what the fiscal policy could do. They have more challenges at their hand now to deal with and begin to think of how to intervene in key sectors that should be driven by the fiscal policy.
Mukhtar, we're also seeing that banks, following this, are limiting, online transactions to $20, per month.
Unfortunately, that's the lowest we've ever had. I mean, before we used to have $100 per month, then we went back to $500 per month, and now we have gone to the lowest we've ever had, $20 per month. Well, that also has to do with the policy that was released by the CBN. Even if that policy is going to take effect sometime in December, banks are beginning to prepare themselves for that. They are beginning to, because the CBN said by December of this year, they will no more be giving FX to banks customers. So banks will need to sort for FX for their customers. That policy has not gone down well with most of us economics. With most of us, we think that before you begin to bring such policy, bring stability in that market space. Then before you begin to introduce policy like you as CBN is still the largest receivers of Nigerian earnings that comes in dollars, because all the crude oil that goes to the CBN directly does not find its way into any bank. So how do you want banks to begin to sort for fund? And you have not given them the liberty to begin to sort for fund to meet demand. So they need to come up with a strategy. I think that is why we are having it. Banks are beginning to be proactive and beginning to see how they can manage what they have, especially when December comes.
Tara, can you share your thoughts on this particular statement by Godwin Emefiele, saying that the sanction imposed on Russia by NATO and the USA would have a significant downside risk on the global economy, also pointing out that the gains of economic growth that the country, that's Nigeria, recorded, as a result of lifting the COVID-19 restrictions have been totally eroded by the Russian-Ukraine crisis?
Totally agree. Totally agree, especially in the area of oil and gas, especially in that area, and most of our economic indices revolve around that space because we depend so much on this energy sector to grow our economy. Especially when you look at the power sector, we've been driven by gas, and those gas are not available because of these challenges and there. So I think I totally agree with him. And that has to do because Nigeria have not had the pain to begin to develop their own infrastructure and have a mechanism to guide against external shocks like this that they have no control about, because our reserve is still hovering between $30 to $31, $30 billion, and that is not enough to even meet our demands in the next 6 months. So the challenge has been that we have not created that shock absorber, especially when we have external shock from a major earning, and that can only be done if we begin to diversify. And it's only when you are satisfied you begin to think of diversification. As it stands now, there's a lot of challenges with us, especially the security challenges. So agricultural diversification is having a stale because we are not beginning to see the diversification because of security challenges. And then the massive oil thief that we are encountering in the Niger Delta also is not helping us at all. And so money that was supposed to go into the federation account are finding their hands into private pocket through those thieves of our crude oil. So, and all, if you look at it, this has to do with security. So definitely, if we need to begin to address these issues, the first thing we need to look at security. How do we address security, especially in the Niger Delta, where the oil thief is becoming so rampant now? How do we address security in terms of food security? How do we begin to guide the farmer? How do we begin to provide security for the farmer? We have to give it to them. We have not seen so much activities in terms of the terrorism, maybe the Boko Haram or the ISIS. It seems that we have dealt with that, but now we are dealing with another monster, that is banditry, which is beginning to take the toll in the agricultural sector, because these bandits are actually terrorizing the farmers more than they terrorize even the security agents. But if you look at the Boko Haram, you saw that they were terrorizing the security agency, but these bandits are more or less targeting the farmers, causing destruction in production.
All right, now quickly before we wrap up, can you share or explain to us how poor electricity supply has actually, put more pressure on the country's inflation?
You just need to look at the numbers that came back from the National Bureau of Statistics, and you know what it has caused. Let me give. I only use one criteria. Power is not available. Most of these companies have to provide power for themselves, and they have to use gas. And as we stand now, gas has moved the price of over 200% from a low of about 200 naira per liter to a high of about 700, and now we are seeing about 650. So that cost will be borne by the consumer. That is that's about 200 and something percent. So that is what we are seeing the inflation. Those numbers that we came out last month is going to be more in the coming month, because we will see this, especially like I said, if the Russia-Ukraine crisis continues. That means they will put more pressure in terms of gas. Remember that most of all these energies, oil, we still import them. So we are still affected by global economic trend. If we were refining this product here, maybe it would have been different. But as long as we are still importing them, then the global market price determine what you sell, because as a businessman, because we buy from globally. So, and again, if you look at the cost of oil, crude oil has gone up to about $115 per barrel. Unfortunately, these are times that we should be excited about it, that our reserve will go up. But unfortunately, it's not like that, because we sell our crude and we import refined products. So what we gain in terms of crude production, we lose in terms of refined production, refined petroleum products that we have to bring in our country. So it's a big challenge.
Thank you so much, Mukhtar, for sharing your perspectives on this particular topic.
My pleasure. Good morning.
Right, so that was Mohammed Mukhtar, yes, financial analyst, joining us via Skype all the way from Lagos. And with that, we've come to the end of Daybreak today on Trust TV. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Darshan Husseina Usman.
And I'm Zainab Bella. See you tomorrow.